My grandchildren, my own flesh and blood, they walked into my home with smiles and promises and walked out with my whole life. They stole more than money. They stole my dignity, my medical lifeline. They used my Medicare card to live it up in Vegas, gambling away my heart medicine, my blood pressure pills, the very things that keep me alive. They left me with a mountain of debts so high, the bank started whispering about taking my home. I was staring at eviction, at the end of everything I ever worked for, all because of them. They thought they had won, thought they'd gotten away clean. They didn't know the most important thing about a grandma's prayer. A prayer for help, a prayer for strength, a prayer for justice. They forgot I serve a God who sees all, who hears every whisper, every cry for help. And that holy miracle not only saved my life and put me on a path I could have never imagined, but it brought them back to my doorstep months later. Broken, and on their knees. That's what you call a divine appointment. Before we continue, make sure you follow our page so you don't miss our next true stories. And if you like what you hear, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear the story, and let us know what part of the United States you're watching from in the comments. Your engagement helps us share these messages with more people who need to hear them. My life was simple and comfortable, you know. A small home on a quiet cul-de-sac in suburban Virginia, a little garden that was my peace, and a steady pension. The house was paid off, a little brick rambler with a white picket fence, just like in a postcard. I had my favorite armchair from Wayfair in the living room, a vintage Singer sewing machine in the corner, and a kitchen that always smelled like coffee and homemade cornbread. My greatest joy came from my grandchildren. Their mama, my only daughter, passed away when they were young, and I raised them as my own. I saw nothing but the best in them. They were my whole world, my everything. My life insurance policy from Nationwide was even set to go to them. I would have given them anything they ever wanted. It was a Tuesday afternoon, I think. I was just finishing up a batch of my famous pecan cookies, the ones they loved so much, when I heard their car pull into the driveway. It wasn't the old rattling Ford Taurus they usually drove. This was a new-looking Chrysler, sleek and black. My heart fluttered with pride. They were doing so well. They came to me, my dear ones, with a plan they'd been cooking up for a little while now. My grandson, Michael, a handsome boy with his father's eyes, spoke first. "Grandma," he said, his voice as smooth as butter, "we've been working so hard. Sarah just got a promotion, and I've been picking up extra shifts at the warehouse. We just need a break, you know? A quick trip to Vegas." Oh, my heart ached for them. They seemed so tired. They had been working so hard to make something of themselves. I knew I couldn't afford to give them much cash, but my health had been stable, and I still had some of my yearly Medicare allowance. I'd been meaning to use it to get my vision checked at LensCrafters and finally replace my old hearing aid, but their pleading was more than I could bear. When they asked me for my Medicare card to hold a hotel reservation, they said they needed it to secure the booking, a little bit of identity verification they called it. They said they couldn't use their own credit cards because of some new system for booking hotel rooms. My granddaughter, Sarah, looked at me with those pleading eyes, and I just couldn't say no. I trusted them completely. "Who else can we trust?" my grandson asked, smiling. And you know, he was right. I trusted them more than anyone. My pension was my safety net, and they were my family. This wasn't some stranger. This was my blood. So I went to my desk, pulled out my Medicare card and my Wells Fargo debit card, and handed them over. I told them, just have a wonderful time, and that I'd be praying for their safe return. I watched them drive away in that new car, my heart full of pride, believing I had done a good thing. They had committed a quiet act of fraud, and I was too blind with love to see it. It was a textbook case of elder financial abuse, and I was the unsuspecting victim. I didn't hear from them for days. My phone was glued to my hand, and every time it rang, my heart would jump. But it was never them. It was telemarketers or the doctor's office. I left them voicemails, little sweet messages saying, "Just checking in, my darlings. Hope you're having a good time." I even tried to check their Instagram and Facebook pages, but they had blocked me. That's when a tiny seed of worry began to take root in my mind, a tiny, ugly thing I tried to stamp out. I told myself they were just too busy having fun, too caught up in the bright lights of Las Vegas. But that little bit of denial came crashing down the day I went to my local Walgreens. I was just trying to get my prescription for my heart medication filled, the one I had planned for weeks. I handed the pharmacist my card, and when she swiped it, her machine just beeped angrily at her. She tried again, and the same thing. She looked at me with this professional, detached pity and said, "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your card, it says it's been maxed out, and your account is frozen because of a huge debt." My hand started to tremble, and a cold sweat broke out on my brow. "That's not possible," I whispered, my voice barely there. "It can't be." But she held up the screen, and there it was, a massive, horrifying number. It wasn't just my Medicare card, it was my entire account. The charges weren't small either. There was a fraudulent charge for a luxury suite at the Bellagio, another for a fancy meal at a famous steakhouse that was probably more than my whole pension for a month. There were charges for private cabanas by the pool, and tickets to a show that must have cost a fortune. The dates were all from the past few days, from Las Vegas. The truth hit me like a ton of bricks, like a physical blow to my chest. They hadn't just used the card for the hotel. They had committed medical identity theft and financial fraud on an unimaginable scale. My small savings account was empty, too. I ran home, my legs feeling heavy as lead, and called the bank. The automated voice was no comfort. I finally got a woman on the line who was kind but firm. All the money was gone. She went through the charges, line by line, a cold, robotic voice listing the lavish expenditures that had stolen my life. "This is a case of severe financial abuse and identity theft, ma'am. We will have to freeze your account and start a full legal investigation." I just hung up the phone. I didn't have the strength to say another word. My entire small fortune, my medical safety net, was gone. I was left with a crushing medical debt I could never repay. I felt a sharp pain in my arm, and the room started to spin. All because of the people I loved most. I felt a chill spread through my bones that had nothing to do with the temperature. My body felt as hollow as my bank account. I was truly, utterly alone. I fell into my armchair and cried tears that felt like they'd been a long time coming. I was lost. All my love, all my faith in them, had been for nothing. I had to face the cruel reality of their elder financial exploitation, and I didn't have the strength. I spent days in despair. I couldn't bring myself to leave the house. The phone was silent now, but the echo of those empty promises rang in my ears. The air in my home felt heavy, thick with the silence that only comes from a broken heart. The sunlight, which used to feel so warm and full of life, now just seemed to highlight the dust motes dancing in the cold air. I would just sit in my armchair, the one my husband used to sit in, and stare out the window, watching the days blur into a gray emptiness. My body ached with a deep fatigue that no amount of sleep could fix, and my mind was a fog of questions and regret. How could I have been so blind? So foolish? I had reached the end of my rope. I had considered giving up. But you see, God was watching over me. He works in mysterious ways. It was my sweet neighbor, a retired nurse from my old church, who saw me from her window as she was watering her petunias. She saw the sadness in my eyes and came right over with a plate of fresh-baked cookies. When I told her what happened, she didn't judge me. She just listened, her face filled with compassion, her eyes tearing up right along with mine. "Don't you lose hope, dear," she told me, her voice as soft as a prayer. "God is watching over you. He works in mysterious ways, and He hasn't abandoned you. He has a plan." She didn't just offer me words. She took action, a living, breathing testament to God's love. She helped me get up and take the first step. "We're going to the police station," she said firmly. And we went together. We stood there in that cold, official building, with the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and she held my hand as I filed a police report for financial crime against my own grandchildren. As we walked out, I could feel a tiny bit of my strength returning, a flicker of a candle in the deep, dark night. But that was just the beginning. The real miracle came when she took me to a faith-based support group at our church. At first, I was so hesitant. I was so full of shame. I didn't want to look anyone in the eye. I felt like I had a big, ugly scarlet letter on my chest that read "Fool." But as I listened to the stories of people who had also lost everything but found salvation through their faith, something inside me started to stir. I heard stories of people who had overcome bankruptcy and legal battles and even criminal charges through nothing but prayer and community. A warmth I hadn't felt in weeks began to fill my chest, pushing back against the cold despair that had settled in my bones. I started to spend my time with these wonderful people, volunteering at their community kitchen on a street just outside of Washington, D.C. It was there, among the big industrial Cuisinart mixers and the scent of yeast, that I began to heal. I would come in early, before anyone else, and just sit in the quiet, empty kitchen, saying my own little prayer. Then, as the others arrived, I'd get to work, kneading dough with my hands, my body remembering the feeling of purpose. I baked for them, using my old recipes, and the community embraced me. My simple loaves of bread became a huge hit. They weren't just friends. They were my family now. They were the family God had given me. This was my holy miracle. In my darkest moment, God had sent me to people who would show me the true meaning of family. I had lost my savings, but I had gained a faith that could never be stolen. A few months later, I was laughing with my new friends. The potluck was in full swing, with my famous baked macaroni and cheese and a sweet potato pie on the table. The air smelled of cinnamon and hot coffee, and the sounds of friendly chatter and laughter filled the room. My heart felt full in a way it never had before. I was healthy and truly happy. The memories of the betrayal were no longer a sharp pain, but a dull ache that served as a reminder of how far I had come. Meanwhile, a quiet, terrifying judgment was being delivered on the other side of town. The money from my cards had long since run out, and the Vegas high had turned into a very low, grinding reality. The fraud investigation by the bank had led to a civil lawsuit against them, and the papers were served right to their apartment door. They couldn't ignore the summons. It had their names, their social security numbers, and the long list of every expense they had charged to my account. They called me, frantic and scared, asking me to drop the charges. I told them I couldn't, that this was out of my hands, a legal matter that had to run its course. Their lives began to unravel with a slow, agonizing crawl. Their jobs were gone. They couldn't get a new one with their credit ruined and a legal cloud hanging over their heads. My grandson got called into his boss's office at the car dealership, and they showed him a printout of the lawsuit. "We can't have a potential felony fraud suspect working with our customers' money," his boss said flatly. My granddaughter's career at the daycare evaporated when a background check for her new position brought up the civil lawsuit. The eviction notice on their door felt like a fitting final chapter to their life in that building. It wasn't just a notice. It was a public declaration of their failure. They were forced to sell their furniture on Facebook Marketplace, and I heard through the grapevine that the young man who bought their brand new TV for almost nothing was laughing with his friends on the curb as they struggled to get it into the back of his pickup truck. They were out of options, out of money, and out of pride. The last thing they sold was their old bed, and they were left with just the clothes on their backs and the shame in their hearts. They were forced to live with a friend, crammed into a tiny living room, sleeping on a twin-sized air mattress that kept deflating. The friend, a young woman who had just graduated college, was tired of their constant complaining and told them they had to go. With no one to turn to, and no money for gas, they made the long, shameful trip back to my little cul-de-sac in Virginia. The old Ford Taurus, now with a dented fender and a sputtering engine, seemed to groan in protest with every mile. The trip felt endless. As the gas tank needle dropped to empty, they coasted into my neighborhood, running on fumes in a last-ditch hope. I was getting ready for bed, the television humming with the soft sound of a news report about a high-profile embezzlement case, when I heard the frantic, desperate knock on my door. I knew it was them. I opened the door to see them, pale and thin with their suitcases. They looked defeated, with eyes haunted by what they had done. My grandson's clothes were wrinkled and stained from the road, and my granddaughter, usually so bubbly and full of life, had her head bowed, too ashamed to look me in the eye. "Grandma," my grandson said, his voice a cracked whisper, "we're so sorry. We lost everything. Can you give us some money for gas?" You know, they didn't even look truly sorry. They just looked tired and defeated. They had come not for forgiveness, but for money. I looked at them, standing there on my front porch, and something came over me. Not anger, not even sadness. Pity. Just pure, heartbreaking pity. I took a slow, deep breath and spoke, my voice low and steady. "I'm sorry, children," I told them. "I can't give you any money. I won't." Their faces fell. Their mouths hung open slightly. They looked at me as if they were seeing a stranger. They expected the old woman, who was too trusting, too weak, too much in love with them, to say no. They couldn't believe it. I could see the wheels turning in their heads, trying to figure out where their plan went wrong. They stood there, silent, the full weight of their moral bankruptcy hanging between us like a storm cloud. I went on. The money you took from me, that wasn't just my money. You see, after you took everything from me, I had no one left to turn to but God. And when I went to Him in prayer, He showed me that the life I had before, it wasn't meant for me. It was too small, too lonely. My purpose was bigger. So when you took that money for your lavish trip and your expensive dinners, you didn't just steal from me. You stole God's money too. That was His blessing, meant to keep me safe and healthy. You can't get that back. What you're seeing now, what you've been living through, losing your jobs, your apartment, that car you loved so much, that's not my punishment for you. That's a different kind of justice. It's divine retribution. That's God's way of showing you that a life built on greed and betrayal will always come crashing down. My granddaughter finally looked up, her eyes full of tears that were less for me and more for herself. My grandson's shoulders were slumped, his chest caved in. They had no response. They had expected a weak old woman. They found a woman with an unwavering faith, with a spirit they couldn't break. This was the true reckoning for them, facing the person they had hurt and realizing she had not only survived but was now thriving in a way they couldn't even comprehend. I went inside and returned with 2 loaves of bread, still warm from my oven. I could feel the heat radiating through the paper bag. "This is all I can offer you," I told them, handing them over. "A piece of the very life you tried to take from me. Now you must find your own way. Pray, children. Pray for a heart that's pure, and God will show you the way home. The only way you can rebuild your lives is on a foundation of faith, not on a foundation of greed." I closed the door gently. I wasn't just closing it on them, I was closing it on the past. The shame was theirs to carry, but the peace was all mine. I was at peace. I had been saved by a holy miracle, and now they were left to face the consequences of their own actions. I knew that my own spiritual redemption was complete, and theirs had just begun. This is a story of faith, of forgiveness, and of finding strength in the most unexpected places. It's a reminder that even in our darkest moments, there is a path to healing and a purpose waiting for us. If this message resonated with you, I pray you'll do a few things for me. Please follow our page so you don't miss our next true story. Give this video a like to help us spread this message of hope. Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. And most importantly, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps us reach more people who are going through their own trials. Thank you, and may God bless you.